Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I still have the frog in my throat, so forgive me for having my deep, very white voice today. But I'm here with my homegirl partner, Miss Yvette Carnell. How you doing today, Yvette?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing well. How are things over at BreakingBrown.com?
Growing, growing. So we're good.
All right, I love it. I love it. Yeah, you run a really vibrant community, and you ask a lot of really important questions that aren't really being asked in mainstream media. We know that, but that's why people come to you because they kind of get that intelligent analysis that comes from a lady that I always say is too smart for TV, and hopefully that'll change. Hopefully, TV will get smarter and catch up with you. But you wrote this article. That a lot of people read, and you were talking about Al Sharpton, and it relates to some media reports this week regarding a perception that Sharpton is a person who kind of carries influence, but kind of sells that influence to the highest bidder in some cases, meaning. Some people almost use a word like extortion, although I'm not going to use that word, even though I just did. That kind of says, we go to the company and we say, if you don't if you don't do XYZ, if you don't take care of me in this way, then I'm going to get people to march against you because I'm going to go publicly and say things about you, regarding some sort of discrimination or whatever. And then, according to the media reports, and it seems that you're saying this in your article as well, that the criticism from Sharpton tends to die down once the company takes care of him. But in terms of seeing concrete deliverables that result from these partnerships, that seems to be lacking. Can you talk a little bit about your article and what you were trying to say?
Well, and this is the thing. It wasn't just the article. There was an article over the weekend. There was an article in the New York Post, which I don't necessarily highly regard. But what people don't understand is that I actually wrote a 3,000 word article about Sharpton and Counterpunch a while ago. Like, so this isn't anything new for me. He's been exposed on this, a while ago. And what he basically does, he goes into these companies and he's like, "You're not doing anything for black people." I think the article talked about Honda, and he says, "You're not doing anything for black people." He talks about the amount of black people who are, in the company or being discriminated against, whatever the case may be. And then what happens is that once they start supporting the National Action Network, everything goes away. Everything goes away, and we're not left with anything in terms of what were your tangible results with this company. Did they increase hiring of minorities? Did they increase hiring? Did they have a diversity initiative that actually worked? What are the tangible benefits of you going into this company and threatening this company and then stopping and ending all of those threats and protests after you get a check? So when you look at that, at least from my perspective, it doesn't look like Sharpton is actually changing the way that company does business. The only thing he's doing is getting a new sponsor. And that's great for Sharpton, but it's bad for black people.
Mm. Well, it's interesting. It's almost like it could be looked at, and I think we should try to be as fair to the Rev as we possibly can, because I will argue that, based on the time that I spent with him, just sort of sitting and listening to him talk and just talking to him man to man about different issues, I did not get the sense that he was a person who does not care about black people. And I have to say that, in all truthfulness, I got a sense that he genuinely cares about issues. I've seen him be very patient with people that, because that's the thing. There's a lot of weight you carry when people see you as sort of this civil rights superhero. And so I saw him be very patient with these people that I don't know if I could have been patient with because it can be very overwhelming because everyone kind of comes to you like you are a messiah, a savior. I help me with this, everything from help me pay the rent to my son got shot to, let me tell you what they're doing in my town to black people, and he handled that very well. And so, do you think that an argument could be made that he says, look, to the company, look, by supporting the National Action Network and knowing that we do concrete work, not just on a national level but on an individualized level for black people, that this does account for or it does create some sort of amends that you're making with the black community. That it's not everything you could do, but it is helping somebody, and that somebody happens to be black. I mean, what would you say if somebody came to you with that argument?
Well, I think first of all, you have to not make an argument that involves somebody's heart. I can't go into Al Sharpton's heart and tell you whether or not his heart is good or tell you what his intentions are. I can only talk to you about whether he's ineffective or effective. And I can say that in terms of the needs of black people, in terms of, black people are being decimated right now by poverty levels, unemployment. In terms of what is most important to black people, going into Honda and having Honda cut a check to the National Action Network is not something that's immensely important to us. So he could possibly have in his heart the best of agendas for black people and still be ineffective in terms of what he's trying to do to benefit us. That's totally possible. I wouldn't bank on that, but that's possible. So what you're looking at that point, you're asking yourself, okay, what would be effective? Well, if you're looking in terms of unemployment, you have to have some policy that targets unemployment, black unemployment. You can't say, as Obama does, that one boat, one wave or whatever the heck he keeps saying, lifts all ships, which is the same thing that Mondale said.
The rising
Yeah,
tide will lift all
rising
boats,
tide
right?
lifts all
Right.
boats or whatever. As black people are sinking, you can't say that. That's something that Mondale said years and years ago when Jesse Jackson's team kind of pushed him for more policies that were going to impact black people in a good way if he got elected. That's an old thing. It doesn't mean anything. It's trite. No, it's crap. So you have to look at some sort of movement politics that actually gathers black people in a way that pushes some sort of policy through that actually helps black people. That is the effective way to do that. You don't do that by just kind of shaking down a company and saying, hey, as Al Sharpton did for another, I think it was Pepsi, that paid him $25,000 a year as some type of diversity person. How does having Al Sharpton on the staff as a diversity person, or whatever the case may be, whatever his title was, how does that help us? It really doesn't. And even the National Action Network, you can't tell me what they're doing across the country in a tangible way to really help black people. How many members do they have? How many dues paying members do they have? How many people can they rally just from National Action Network, not from National Action Network reaching out to get other people, just from terms of what they do? I mean, wasn't it only a short time ago that Bill O'Reilly was saying that the National Action Network was broke, and that Al Sharpton came to him begging for money? So when you look at just how he does that and how he runs it, it's very ineffective. Now, it's great in terms of his salary and what he has and the lifestyle that he lives. I know I heard he knows a Trader Joe in the basement of his apartment, a lot of great stuff. But in terms of black people, not so much.
Well, what's interesting if you think about the I guess the trajectory of Sharpton's life, and you go back to his roots, and in say the 1970s and 80s when he was a young man. That was a time where in New York the mafia had a lot of power from I'd say 70s and 80s, and it started to dwindle when the feds really started to clamp down. And Sharpton had some dealings with the mafia. Now, how those dealings worked, I don't know the details, but he was in that space, right? He had to deal with them. And one of the things that I thought about, recently when I was doing some study on that era, is you can. It almost seems like you can compare what Sharpton's being accused of to be similar to what some of the mob bosses did with labor unions. How they would control the labor union and then go to the company and say, "You need to take care of me. Pay us for protection or whatever. And if you don't pay us, then the labor unions will go on strike." Right? You won't have any workers because they're not going to show up. They're going to sit down on the job. And I wonder if there is a perception that black people are controlled in the same way, almost like Sharpton has positioned himself almost as a ward boss or a mafia boss who peddles this influence in the black community to corporations and says, "Look, pay me for protection. If you don't pay me, then you're going to have black people out in front of your business with picket signs by tomorrow," right? And so if that's the case, I think we have to ask ourselves, where does this influence come from? Is it because black people are just that easily misled? And sometimes that's true, but I think that I know some very intelligent black people who believe in Al Sharpton, and the question is, why do they believe in him? I would argue that he's probably had to have done some things that at least appear to be authentic enough that he's able to maintain this influence that he can then go back and sell. All right, right. So do you think it could be sort of a mixture of both? That he's sort of mixing, almost like diluting a drink, right? You mix in some of the real stuff, and then you fill it up, the rest up with water, or you put the baking soda in with the crack, and you get a little bit of crack and a whole lot of baking soda. I mean, do you think that that's kind of what might be happening here?
Well, I think to a certain extent, listen, I think what's happened is that Al Sharpton has been very good at one thing. Like Al Sharpton has always been very good at getting media attention to the issue, right? So if a young black guy gets shot by a cop, Al Sharpton can get cameras there. Okay. So that's what he's always been good at. So in terms of that, Al, in terms of getting media attention, Al Sharpton is good. What we have to understand though is that in terms of getting policies, that's just the beginning. Getting media attention is just the beginning of what you do. It is not a success just because the media showed up and took pictures. That you want to get media attention, that's great, but that's like part 1 out of 10. So what we've done is basically say he's a great civil rights leader because he gets the media to show up, not understanding that that's just part of a process. Like if you're going to have a movement, media attention is a part of that movement, but it's not the movement. So I think that's a big part of the problem in terms of how we view things. The second part of the problem is that in terms of our investment in Al Sharpton, we have tended to confuse black identity with black politics. So because we have these people on the right who hate Al Sharpton, we kind of believe that it's our job to protect him. And we do the same thing with Obama because Obama gets called a tar baby and gets called a Muslim socialist from the right wing. We rally around him. And I think we have to sort of divorce the two things and say, yes, I am going to call you out as a racist when you call Obama a Muslim socialist because it's just not true, and it's part of the otherization of a black president. But on these other issues, he is wrong. He isn't helping black people policy wise, and that's kind of why you're president. You're not president to be the daddy to all black people and talk about black boys. You're here for policy, and so I think if you're going to call yourself an activist, you have to point to something that you have achieved. If you are an activist for black people, you have to point to like some legislative actual policy achievements that you have achieved that will withstand the test of time long after you're gone. And I don't think Al Sharpton can do that. And he's been able to kind of carve out a space for him because we haven't demanded that that be the standard for activists. We haven't demanded that they follow all the way through with legislators and everything else and make sure that something real and tangible that outlives them, takes place. We haven't demanded that, and that's why we haven't gotten it.
Well, it is interesting to be able to say that. Um, I'd be hard pressed to, and maybe there's evidence out there to the contrary, but to your point, we will both be hard pressed, I think, to find any situation where, uh, Sharpton criticized a corporation, and then the corporation paid him, and then he continued to criticize the corporation publicly. It's almost like, he's out front with the picket sign saying this company's racist. They say, "Come on in, Al. We want to hire you as a consultant or whatever for diversity." He gets his money, and then you hear nothing else afterward, right? And I think that it sounds to me like what you're saying is that there has to be that follow through. There has to be that concrete, tangible evidence to say that I sat down with this company. Yes, they did, make a donation to my organization, and maybe they did pay me. I don't think there's anything wrong with Al Sharpton making money, but the problem is you have to. It's the onus is on you at that point to prove that there isn't some form of corruption going on. That you have not just taken care of Al Sharpton at the expense of everybody else. Because if you don't, then you kind of end up looking a little bit like some of these dictators in African countries who will, sell the oil and the resources dirt cheap to European companies because the companies are taking care of the royal family, but it's supplying them with a big military to protect them from all the people that are going to, all the poor people that are going to be angry about this and leaving everybody else destitute, right? You look at countries like Nigeria with all the oil they have, they shouldn't have poverty like they have in Nigeria. It shouldn't be what it is. But the corruption is what creates that poverty, and so in a way maybe you can argue the same thing with Sharpton, because if you look over the last 3 or 4 years, and again I'm really trying to be fair on this. I mean, I have been everything from I am everything from a fan to a critic of Sharpton and everything in between. I do not see him as one thing. I don't think that destroying Sharpton is always the answer to everything, because I want to believe that there's some good in there in terms of what he's been trying to do. But at the same time, we have to be honest about some of the things that we see that just don't make us comfortable. And so I can say this. I know a couple years ago when I worked with the family of Emmett Till to confront Lil Wayne about the lyrics and what he said, and we got Mountain Dew to kill Lil Wayne's contract, his record deal. I got a call from somebody who said, we're going to go meet with the PepsiCo executives about this, and we're taking Al Sharpton. And I said, okay, fine. I don't need to go. I don't really care that much about being involved in that kind of stuff. I think I can offer some support because I understand corporate America. I'm a business school professor, but I don't really, I didn't mind being uninvolved. But I did say, well, you know, I don't understand where Sharpton. What did he do? I mean, other than join in after the victory was achieved. And I said, but you know what? Fine, okay, go ahead, go meet, see, let me know what happens. And the only thing I saw come out of that, and I'm an insider on this, right? I mean, I wrote the article that led to them killing Lil Wayne's contract. Um, and only thing I saw come out of this was that Al Sharpton announced he had a book deal with Lil Wayne. And I said, I mean, I'm like, what? I mean, literally, my head was going to explode, not out of anger, but confusion. Confusion. I mean, I would be absolutely embarrassed if you saw Dr. Boyce Watkins confront PepsiCo and Lil Wayne, and then I come out and say, me and Cash Money Records are publishing my next book. I could not at that point call myself any kind of civil rights leader at all. And that's just being real. And so I think that at the very least, I was hoping that Rev could come with something to supplement that to say, yeah, I'm doing this book deal because they're doing this for the community. But I saw nothing like that. And I think that is where the problem is. I mean, what do you think, Yvette?
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. There has to be something tangible that outlives you, right? You can't just go there and be like, well, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this thing with PepsiCo or whoever. And the reason why they chose him to come in is because the outcome is predictable. I mean, when you bring Reverend Al Sharpton in, the outcome is predictable. You can set up something where you include him on the board for a fee or whatever, and everything is hushed. Everything is over. You don't want to bring in new black people because you don't know, they're not predictable. You don't know how they're going to do, how they're going to react, what they're going to demand. You know what I mean? So, it almost seems to me as that we've gotten to the point to where Al Sharpton is like a tool of the very structure that he says he's there to criticize. He is a tool of that very structure. And even in terms of how we do things, and I tell people this all the time, when you look at revolutions throughout the world, in this country and elsewhere, they're usually led by young people. So I don't understand why this older man is now the face of protesting wherever, because or that he should be, because you can be a consultant. I'm not saying that you can't. If these people ask you for advice, if the Ferguson protesters, the protests in New York who protested Eric Gunn, if they ask you for anything, I'm not saying that you shouldn't respond. But the idea that you continually throw yourself. These people were protesting before you got there. These people were doing their thing before you got there. They were organizing before you got there. Why do you feel the need to always come in and kind of assert yourself in a leadership role? So I think that for me, I see him as a problem because I see him as a tool, and I think he's there to kind of give these people a veneer of diversity and say, oh, Al Sharpton's in, he's gonna make sure something happens, and then we all walk away and nobody knows what happened. What did happen? What was the result of that? Okay, if we're 5 years, 10 years down the line, show me the data. Show me what this company is doing now versus what they weren't doing then. Okay, if they only had 8% black staff then, do they have 16 now? We're 13% of the population. What percentage do they have now? So there are no tangible standards. We all just walk away once Al Sharpton walks in and say, hey, I'm here now. I'm in control. I have it. I got everything together. I'm on the board. And we all walk away. And I'm like, for what? Like you haven't proven anything to me.
Well, maybe that's why the Ferguson, the hands up movement, I can't breathe. Maybe that's why these movements have been more successful than anything we've seen in recent years, is because they told the old school establishment to get the hell out of the way, right? It was kind of a rebellion, I think, not just against structural racism, but also against this, the structurally oppressive forces that exist within the civil rights community. And I applaud that. I mean, I think that the young people that were involved in Ferguson and the movements around the country, I think that it's important to always make sure everything's focused, right? Which I think a lot of people do. But at the same time, I think that there is kind of what's the word? I don't want to call it naivete, but although it can be used in a good way, idealism and an audacity that can come with youth, where you just say, "Look, we ain't trying to hear you no more." And now, mind you, I didn't enjoy when the guy went off on Jesse Jackson and you ain't done nothing. What you want? I don't think we should approach it that way. I mean, I think guys like Reverend Jackson and even Reverend Sharpton to some extent, they've made sacrifices for the community. They really have, and I believe in that. But at the same time, there is a point where you either have to step aside or be forced to the side, because young people should be leading these movements because they're not caught up in the materialistic trappings of being rich and famous and powerful that can cause people to lose their focus. If you look at a Sharpton lifestyle, he's in the fancy clubs and expensive restaurants, smoking cigars with NBA athletes and rappers and politicians, and that is not going to keep you focused on what you're there to do, in my opinion. I mean, that's going to lead you to get, if you're not careful, you can be more caught up in being a celebrity and being rich and powerful than you are in actually pursuing the cause that you're there for. So, I'm not going to walk away with a complete verdict on Sharpton, good, bad, or otherwise. I think we can give Sharpton a pardon for some of what he's done in the past, not everything. But I think that pardon can be offered with the expectation that, look, you're almost 60. It's time for you to know your role and to support what young people are doing as opposed to trying to take it over, because people don't trust you in that role. You took over, and when it came time to go meet with President Obama, those guys came out with nothing. You've taken over in various civil rights movements and marches and all these other things. Nothing comes out of that. Almost nothing. At least nothing tangible that most of us can see. And so, you've proven that's not really a role that you can handle. And I'll say this and I'm done. I'll let you get the last word. But I'm thinking mostly about the Obama presidency. You are the right hand man of the president when it comes to civil rights. They handpick you because they want to freeze out Jesse Jackson. They don't want to deal with Jesse, so they bring in Sharpton. He's got more power and influence than he's ever had. God bless him for that. But at the end of the day, when you look back on this presidency and you write the history of the Obama presidency and Al Sharpton's role in that, the only conclusion you can come to is that Sharpton was an employee of President Obama, because in almost every situation, you rarely saw Sharpton taking the agenda of the people to the president, but you always saw him taking the agenda of the president to the people. So the person whose water you're carrying is the person that you're working for. You are carrying Obama's water, therefore you work for Obama, and that's the only conclusion I can come to. Yvette?
Well, I think you're right, and I would even say Al Sharpton has more power and influence now. I would say he has more access because I haven't seen him been able to. I haven't seen that he's been able to move anything. Move anything in terms of influence or power. I wrote something a while ago that Al Sharpton has been inside the White House, has met with the White House, according to the White House guest book, 60 some odd times he's been there. 60 some odd times. But when the whole Ferguson stuff went down, when the stuff went down in Ferguson and then the Eric Garner, grand jury verdict come down, he comes out and says, well, we're going to have to march. No, if you have influence and power, you don't march. You go in there and you talk to the president, you tell him what's going down. You don't march if you have power and influence. You're telling us that after all this time, you have been the president's conduit to black people, and you have absolutely no power. Either you have no power or you're doing exactly what the White House is telling you to do, which is to covertly take over this movement so nothing happens because of it. Either way, in my estimation, we should walk away from this. And I'm not, I mean, I really, Al Sharpton is one of those, was one area in my life where there's not a lot of gray. Like, I think it's been time for him to walk away for a long time. I think he's compromised in terms of the whole FBI thing and on a lot of other shakedown information. And I think it's been time for him to walk away for some time. I think the people, the activists who have been involved in this movement have been helping to kind of push him out the door. And I think it's really time for black people to give him that final shove.
Mm. All right. Well, okay. Well, the final show. There you go. Well, Yvette, you don't play. Everybody, I want you to know she's the mean one. She's the mean one. I'm the nice guy. Well, I look forward to seeing how this, turns out, and I'm glad you give such authentic analysis on this. And I want everybody to go take a look at Yvette's article on the topic. It is on Breaking Brown. Do you remember the title of your article offhand, Yvette?
I think the title was something to the cake of black people don't benefit from Al Sharpton's revenue model, shakedown revenue model, or something of that nature.
Oh, there you go. Okay, yeah, okay, I found it. It's Al Sharpton's shakedown revenue model, is bad for black people. Okay, so I want everybody to
Absolutely.
go to breakingbrown.com and read that article. Yvette has a lot of great things to say about this, and you know, and I encourage you to just think for yourself. You know, the greatest black leader in your life is the person in the mirror. So make sure you lead your families, lead yourself, lead your community, and we'll all be better in the end. Well, thank you very much, Yvette. I really appreciate your time.
Not a problem.
All right. Thank you all for checking us out at yourblackworld.net. Until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.